In March of 2017, I said that the Ryzen 7 CPU launch was the most important in 10 years. It was true then, it's true today. The launch of a true competitive 8-core 16-thread desktop CPU finally moved the entire desktop PC industry off of the 4-core 8-thread model that it had been stuck on for 10 years. Thanks, Intel. Now, Ryzen is not the fastest desktop CPU in the world. It's not the fastest gaming CPU in the world. But what it is a tremendous value for the money. It's almost as fast as Intel for a lot less money. And for most of you, it is the right choice. Today, we're building a Ryzen 7 2700X Super Premium Desktop PC. If you want to play any current game, live stream those games to Twitch, and do content creation, video editing, 3D animation, or frankly, anything else with a desktop PC, you've come to the right place. This is a super premium build with a lot of upgraded components. In today's video, I'm going to take you through the component selection, why they're included, what the benefits are, and then what the less expensive choices you could pick if you want to adjust the budget for your own needs. All of the components on the desk and the design of this build is $2,500. I know that's a lot, and you can certainly build a Ryzen 7 machine for a lot less. In fact, I've done that on my channel. Only a few months ago, there was a $1,000 Ryzen 7 build on my channel. But this is designed to be a very premium experience with lots of storage, lots of RAM, a ridiculously beautiful case, and all of these components can be adjusted because, as I love to say, custom PCs are custom. Build it your way. Linked in the video description below are going to be two lists. The first list is going to be the build as you see here, the $2,500 build. The second build down there is going to be a $1,600 build, $900 less. It still includes the same graphics card. It still includes lots of NVMe storage. The case is scaled back, the cooler is scaled back. It's a non-X chip instead of the X chip. It's 16 gigs of RAM instead of 32, but it still has an RTX 2080 graphics card for epic gaming performance. And of course, mix and match as you see. We'll talk about the various choices in this video. Before you all scream at me, but Zen 2. I know, Zen 2 is coming, which is the Ryzen 3000 series chips. We are only weeks away at this point from that launch. However, this build guide still applies whether this is a 2700X or a 3700X. ASUS will most certainly release a Crosshair 8 Hero motherboard with an X570 chipset. If you're watching this a month from now and you go, but what about the next generation chips? By all means, if you've got a $2,500 budget, get a Ryzen 7 3700X, get a Crosshair 8 Hero motherboard, and do everything else the same because the design principles are not going to change in 3 weeks' time. However, some of you may still want to build a 2700X, not just in 3 weeks, but maybe even in 3 or 6 months. Many months after 2700X launched, the 1700X was actually the deal. As recently as Black Friday 2018, 18 months after 1700X launched, it was still the deal. It was available on Newegg for $149, half the price of the 2700X for 10 to 20% less performance. For a lot of people building a mid-range system, that's a heck of a deal. Now, in a super premium system like this, you might want the latest and greatest chip. But as we go through the parts, if you scale some of this back and you build the $1,600 version, then even 6 months from now, a 2700X may still be the deal, depending upon how much it's discounted versus the new ones. Rest assured, when Zen 2 launches, I will do plenty of benchmarks comparing the old to the new and giving you a value analysis, figuring out is it worth still buying this or not. It is also worth remembering that Intel is not sitting still either. They currently have an 8-core 16-thread chip, the i9-9900K. It's very nice. We'll talk about that at the end of the video. But they are currently preparing a 10-nanometer Comet Lake for a Z-Force 70 chipset for launch in the next few months. 10 cores, 20 threads, and possibly more than 5 gigahertz? We'll have to see. It's not coming out at Computex, but it looks like it may be coming out in August. So we're playing leapfrog here. The next 6 months, the next 18 months is going to see several generations of CPUs launched. It's very easy to say, well, I'll just wait till the next thing comes out. But the next thing after that will be just a few months away. Buy when you're ready to buy. Pick out the best components you can get, look for a deal, and frankly, enjoy your computer for many, many years. Because whether you build the 2700X or 3700X, both are going to last you a long time. This video is a detailed parts overview and parts selection guide. The build itself, I'll move over here, is going to be right there. That build video is over on Floatplane right now. Floatplane Media is the company started by Linus of Linus Media Group, and it is a subscription-only service that allows you higher quality videos, early access, exclusive videos, downloadable videos, better quality videos for the low price of only $3 per month. That build video is 2 hours and 11 minutes long. It is very detailed, and 95% of my hands-on time on this computer is in that video. I even left the mistakes in there. The truth of the matter is we all make mistakes, and usually they get edited out of videos, but I left them in there as a treat for our Floatplane subs. That is an exclusive video that will never be posted here to YouTube. This parts overview and hardware review guides will always be here on YouTube, but a few fun things like that are over there. For $3 a month, which is basically the cost of renting one movie, you get a ton of exclusive videos and a bunch of other benefits, and 2 hours and 11 minutes of watching me fumble about with RGB cables. Well, that's enough overview and general explanation. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of the parts guide itself, starting with the base of any system build, the motherboard. Priced into this system build is a $250 super premium board, the Asus ROG Crosshair 7 Hero motherboard. That is a mouthful and a half. That thing is loaded with features. It has dual PCI Express M.2 4x slots. Most Ryzen boards do not run both of their M.2 slots at 4x speeds. It has 4 different RGB headers, more USB ports than you can shake a stick at, and all of the power delivery and other features you could want now and in the future for either 3rd or 4th generation Ryzen chips if you choose to upgrade. It is, however, $250, and that's more than the average person is probably going to spend on a board. The board on top of it is actually what is on my test bench, and all of my Ryzen 7 2700X benchmarks on the channel have been done on that board. That board initially was $200. It's been available for a little bit less in the $180 range. Performance-wise, I can tell you the 2700X is exactly the same performance between those two boards. The extra cost is not performance, it's features. How many extra features do you want? Most of you are probably going to be perfectly fine with something like a ROG Strix X470-F or something similar. You can get a similar $200 board from any of the major companies, and it's going to perform the same way. Or you can save some money and you can drop all the way down to a $100 board like this B450. Now, I've built with this board. This is actually an empty box. If you've watched my previous videos, then you saw that get built. When you drop down to this level, you might give up 100 megahertz of clock speed. They do tend to be just a little bit slower, especially since they don't have the performance boost optimizations and they don't turbo quite as high due to power delivery and whatnot. But it's a minor difference overall. And especially, we'll get to the 2700 versus 2700X. If you're not looking to do maximum overclocking, then frankly, a B450 may be fine. Where a B450 may not fail you, but let you down, is if you want to upgrade in the future. Perhaps you want a Ryzen 3000 or 4000 series chip, 12 or 16 cores in the future with more clock speed. There may not be the power delivery available on a B450 board, especially at the $100 price point, in order to accommodate that. That's also potentially true of the lower end X470 boards. If you find one of the $120 boards, it may or may not do it. Move up in the price spectrum and you gain some additional flexibility as well as features. Better sound chips, better LAN chips, more connectivity, more USB ports, etc. Speaking of CPUs, one common question is, what is the difference and is it worth moving between a 2700 and a 2700X? What you see right here are the two coolers included. This is the Wraith Spire RGB cooler, and this is the Wraith Prism RGB cooler, 2700X, 2700. Out of the box at stock speeds, there's about a 300 megahertz clock speed difference between these two CPUs at their default settings. They're both unlocked and overclockable. The X does not mean unlocked, and a lack of an X doesn't mean that it's locked. What X means is that it has precision boost and it has XFR, or basically auto overclocking. It will boost higher if you have sufficient cooling. It's not a huge boost, however, and if you're expecting dramatic performance increases, you're going to be disappointed. The truth of the matter is, for most people, the 2700 is actually the value, and the $1,600 build down in the description below has this, because on the day I'm filming this video, there's a $70 price difference between these CPUs, and at $2,500, spend the money. But at $1,600, there's too many other places to put that $70 into, so it just depends upon your overall build. It is also worth noting that this Wraith Spire is virtually silent. It is a very, very quiet cooler. I love the Spires. 2 of my own personal machines have Spires on them. The Wraith Prism is gorgeous. It has RGB for days. It's got a ring. The entire fan in the center is RGB. It's great, but it's not silent. And it's not very cool running. At the high boost speeds this can achieve, it runs quite hot and quite loud, which is why I didn't use it. This build uses an aftermarket cooler because it keeps the temps down, it allows more boost clock speed, and frankly, it's much quieter. That brings us to system RAM. I am pleased to report that Ryzen no longer is picky or particularly cares about which brand of RAM that you buy for your system. On the modern 400 series motherboards, which you should be using these days, I have found all of my 3200 megahertz kits work just fine in all of the X470 boards that I have used. That wasn't true 2 years ago, or even a year and a half ago. There were some issues with RAM. There's a video on my channel from 2017, needs an update, but that video is kind of obsolete at this point when it comes to RAM compatibility. So now it comes down to capacity, price, and RGB. At the $2,500 price point, there's really only one option, 32 gigs of RAM. If you have need to build such a machine, this much storage, this much power, this much performance, 32 gigs or bust. Possibly 64, although it doesn't fit in the budget very well. Might have to go a bit above for that, but 32 gigs is where it's at. RAM prices have dropped. 32 gigabytes of DDR4 3200 megahertz RAM is now under $200, so there's no need to get less. 16 is all you need to just play games. But if you're just playing games, you don't have to build a $2,500 machine. It's nice, but you don't have to. The $1,600 machine linked in the description below is a 16 gigabyte build because $1,600. I would not, under any circumstance, build a new computer in 2019 with less than 16 gigs of RAM. You can get 16 gigs of RAM for like $65 these days. 3,000 instead of 3,200, but at that price point, there's just no need to go for less. Notice I have a lot of different kits on the desk. I don't have a preference here because all the memory modules are really built by Micron and Samsung, etc. None of these companies really build RAM. They just take the memory modules and put pretty RGB on them. You've got Gigabyte, you've got ADATA, you've got Corsair, and some others. Buy the speed that you prefer, which is generally going to be DDR4 3200 is sort of the sweet spot of price to performance at the moment. CL16 is the most common. Many people ask me, should I get CL14? Don't bother. It's too expensive. The Samsung B die, it used to matter. It doesn't anymore. Just get the CL16. It's just fine, and buy whichever one you want. One more thing on system RAM. I am sure somebody's going to comment and say, wait a minute. Why do you have liquid-cooled RAM on the desk? Do you seriously build this machine with liquid-cooled RAM? Yes, I did. Thanks to ADATA for sending it to me. It's kind of cool. Now, does the liquid cooling make it faster or better or somehow superior to the other RAM? No, not at all. It's appearance and fun. It's about $15 more for 16 gigs of liquid-cooled RAM than it is for RGB non-liquid-cooled RAM. For $15, do you want to be able to have liquid on your RAM and point to it and say, I've got liquid-cooled RAM, I've got everything now? It's fun, it's cool, it's very nice looking. Individually addressable LEDs on there. It's really, really nice, but the liquid cooling doesn't really do anything. It's no faster than the others. It's just shiny for another 15 bucks. For system storage, we have several drives in this computer. Let's start off with the boot drive. For a $2,500 build, there's exactly one option, high performance NVMe M.2 storage. In this case, 1 terabyte SX8200 Pro from ADATA. $159 for a premium drive. That is a great, great deal. 5-year warranty, 640 terabyte total drive write life rating. If I can say that correctly, it is a great value for the money. How great a value? In terms of performance, it's almost exactly the same as the Samsung 970 EVO Plus, the refreshed 970 EVO they just recently released. These are both basically refreshes of last year's drives, except the price is not the same. There is a nearly $100 price difference between the Samsung drive and the ADATA drive for the same performance, for the same warranty, for the same features. That's an amazing value for the money. I like to call it the Samsung tax. Everybody knows what the Samsung is. Everybody's heard of it. But if you put these drives in your machine, they're effectively the same performance, but the ADATA is such a better deal. So if you want to save some money, get yourself the ADATA drive. Now that's the boot drive. For the data drives, you have a lot of different options. At the $2,500 price point, I have put a 2 terabyte Intel 660p NVMe SSD in here. The 660p is a revision of the older 600p. The 600p was terrible. The 660p is not. Intel fixed the problems. It's a great revision of the drive. It is QLC and it is not as fast as either of these drives. Up to half the performance, half the random read, half the random write overall performance. But $209 for 2 terabytes of space. So it is less expensive than even the SX8200 Pro, but not as quick. Perfect game drive. This is the boot drive, maybe 2 or 3 of the most popular games, your data files, your non-game programs, Office, Adobe, whatever else you're putting on your machine, and then use this for your game drive, which is exactly what I've done with this machine. It's in there, it's going to stay in there, and I use that for that. If you've never experienced your Steam library, your Uplay library, your Origin library, if you've not experienced those on an SSD, you go to update games, you go to launch games, you switch levels, you're in a big open world game, you're playing Fallout or Grand Theft Auto 5, you haven't experienced the lack of the microstutters as it loads from a mechanical hard drive versus an SSD. It isn't maybe a night and day difference like booting to an SSD, but it is there. And if you have $2,500, your game should be on an SSD. On the $1,600 version of this machine, I took out the performance drive and we're actually going to boot to this NVMe drive. It's not as fast, but for a $1,600 budget, I don't have a problem using it for a boot drive, not for a $2,500 machine. So we're just using the 2 terabyte drive, dropping this, and it's still great performance for a mid-range machine. Now, if you all watch the build of this, you will notice that I put 2 more SSDs in here. I put a Samsung 860 EVO 2.5-inch drive and an ADATA SU630 2.5-inch drive, both 1 terabyte in size because I need lots of space. There is 5 terabytes of SSD space in this machine. Yes, that's nuts. The $2,500 budget allows for 4 of that. The ADATA SU630 isn't in the $2,500 price, but the Samsung 860 EVO is. So 1 terabyte, 2 terabytes, and 1 more terabyte are all in the budget for this system. Notice something missing? No mechanical hard drive. This is 2019. You should not be running your programs or games off mechanical hard drives anymore, at least not at either of these 2 budgets, $1,600 or $2,500. If you have a $500 budget, okay, I understand mechanical hard drives. Even $700, $800, $900 budget, fair enough, some of you are still going to have mechanical hard drives. Not at these price points. It makes no sense. Now, hard drives are still very useful for backup and media libraries. I recently did an ultimate home theater PC build with 16 terabytes of storage, but that's networked and provides storage throughout my house, so I don't need drives in each individual machine. Backup also makes sense. External 8 terabyte hard drives have recently been available for $139. If you need to back up your files, get yourself an external hard drive. They're not very expensive anymore, and you can unplug them, which you should for your backups. All this talk of gaming, and we haven't discussed the graphics card, perhaps the most important part of a gaming PC. Now you'll notice I've added the box to the 2080 Ti here. Let me be absolutely abundantly clear. In a $2,500 build budget, you can most certainly fit a $1,200 or $1,300 graphics card. To say you can't is ridiculous, but you'll have to give up some things to get there. Buy less case, buy less power supply, buy less motherboard, buy less storage, scale back the RAM, but you can do it. That's a personal preference. I'll leave that up to you. The 2080 Ti will certainly have more future-proofing in front of it, but if you're playing at 1080p or 1440p, maybe even 4K, depending upon the games, a 2080 will do the job just fine, unless you want to play every single game at 4K. Assassin's Creed Odyssey, frankly, needs a 2080 Ti these days. But putting aside the corner cases, a 2080 is a better value for the money. For $800, you get 8 gigabytes of GDDR6. If you want to play games on that, for example, I recently reviewed the MSI 1440p 32-inch 144 Hz FreeSync and G-Sync support through FreeSync. If you want to play games on that at 144 frames per second, 2080 Ti will do a very, very nice job. A $2,500 PC should certainly not have less than a 2080. Absolutely. And again, it just comes down to personal preference or what deal or price you can find. If you can find a 2080 Ti for only $200 or $300 more and you want to shuffle things around, go for it. It is faster. It has 11 gigs of VRAM versus 8. It will last you longer. That's a great, great deal. What about AMD? Well, currently AMD only has one competitor to these cards, the Radeon 7. Don't bother. I have one. I've posted noise and sound tests on it over on the Tech Deals Gaming channel. It's loud, it's hot, and it is not performance competitive with these cards. It's a little bit slower than the 2080, only beating it in AMD optimized titles, but across the board, it's a little bit slower, and it is very hot and very loud. It is not optimized for gaming. It is a compute card. It's designed for people doing render work, not gaming work. It's nice, but just don't bother. Get an RTX 2080 for a system at this price point. There are almost as many choices in PC cases as there are colors in the RGB rainbow. Fractal Designs define S2 Vision RGB. That's a mouthful, and it's a whole lot of case, as well it should be for $240. Now, I have done a review of this. I'll put a snippet up here. That is a nice long 26-minute detailed look at why that's a $240 case. It is beautiful. Glass on the front, glass on both sides, glass on the top, modular components, replaceable vents, 5 different ARGB devices, 4 fans, and an ARGB light strip. For those of you not familiar, the A stands for addressable. Instead of the fan being any color you want, but the whole fan has to only be one color, the individual LEDs within each fan are individually addressable. So the fan itself can be a rainbow, or the fan can be a strobe, or different colors. You can create patterns. So it's much more advanced than regular RGB, but it's $240. For a $2,500 system build, that makes sense. I don't have a problem with that at a $2,500 system build if you want shiny. If you don't, well, save some money and put it somewhere else if you prefer. This, however, is the deal. This is a $90 case. It is the Cooler Master H500. There's a build in here. This is on my channel. I put a Ryzen 5 in here. $90 gets you a very, very similar sized case, maybe a little bit bigger, handle in the front, glass on one side, vents on the top. There is a ventilation up here for cooling. There's no glass on the top. There's no glass on this side, but frankly, that just makes cable management a lot easier because you don't have to worry about it because it's just a metal panel. And there's mesh on the front instead of glass. The airflow in here is spectacular. The 2 fans in front are RGB, but they are not ARGB. They're just straight RGB. So the whole fan can only be one color at a time, but they're still very pretty. And by the way, did I mention it was only $89? So in terms of practical building purposes, a very similar case to Super Premium over here, you get functionality without quite so much shiny. Which one you prefer is a personal choice. This is gorgeous. And when I was doing the RGB shots on it, it really is gorgeous. But you pay for it. There are a lot of other choices in between these two, and I'm not even going to begin to attempt to talk about all of them. In the builds down below, the $2,500 build has this case. The $1,600 build has this case for good reason. This really is the deal, in my opinion, in terms of width, height, expansion options inside. The cable management in the back is really easy to do. It's really nicely built. I would absolutely buy this again. Totally recommended at that price point. What system build would be complete without a power supply? Well, for a super premium machine at the $2,500 price point, just go get yourself a 1,000 watt power supply. That's what you need, right? Please don't. That's a horrendous waste of money. I mean, you can if you want to, but it's a complete waste of money. On the other side of the coin, we couldn't possibly run this computer off a 500 watt 80 plus white budget power supply for $39, could we? Actually, you could. I wouldn't, I don't recommend it, but you could. The wattage draw of the CPU and graphics card and the whole system here would totally fit within 500 watts. The original plan with this build was to use this EVGA 550 watt G3, very nice quality, fully modular power supply, eco mode, zero fan speed mode, wonderful quality, except it only has a single 8-pin CPU power connector and the Asus ROG Crosshair 7 Hero, so many product names, that requires a 4+8 on the CPU, so I had to replace it, and we're using this instead, the 750 watt gold, the GQ, which is way insane overkill. I have noticed that people are overbuying their power supplies. Public service announcement, you don't need as much wattage as you think you do. The Ryzen 7 1700X overclocked to 4 GHz with an RTX 2070 that I built back in November on my channel struggles to pull 200 watts from the wall in gaming. Now that's not an artificially high load like Ada 64 or Prime 95 would put on the computer. Those would go higher. But playing Grand Theft Auto 5 at 1440p on that computer pulled 200 watts from the wall. It really doesn't draw as much as you think. Now it is true that a 2700X will pull a small additional amount, maybe 10% more than a 1700X, and a 2080 will pull maybe 10-15% more than a 2070. But it's not going to take it from 200 watts to 500 watts. There is no possible way in the world any consumer desktop PC, short of multiple graphics cards, needs more than 500 watt power supply these days. There was a time a few years ago when that might not necessarily have been true, but those times are gone. So you really don't need tons of power supply, and if you buy something that only needs a single 8-pin CPU power connector, then 550 watts is just fine. I would go with at least a bronze. You might consider the B3 instead of the G3. It's a little bit less expensive, and that is what is priced in the $1,600 build down below. I do have that power supply priced in the $2,500 build. It's what I used. It's nice. It's about $93 when I'm filming this video. But I put the 550 watt B3 80 plus bronze, still very nice, in the $1,600 build. Those similar levels, bronze and gold with those wattages from any of the major manufacturers will be just fine. Seasonic, Corsair, Cooler Master, take your pick, it doesn't really matter. Frankly, there's only like 3 or 4 companies that really make power supplies anyway, and then these companies all put their names on them. Last, but certainly not least, is our cooler choice. I have installed the 240mm version of the Cooler Master ARGB liquid cooler. It's available in 120, 240, and 360. If you don't mind spending the extra $50 or so, get the 360mm cooler, both for an additional fan, more RGB, and a little bit better cooling. The ARGB on these is absolutely gorgeous. I'll put a beautiful shot up here, and there's more in the case review where I actually installed it. But the fans themselves have individually addressable RGB lights if you like that sort of thing. The actual pump head itself has individually addressable lights in it as well, so it's really, really nice. If you don't have RGB controllers on your system, it does come with a very nice RGB controller, or just plug them into your motherboard. You can see over there on the bottom the 240 version. Notice on top of it, we have the 240mm light RGB cooler from Cooler Master. What's the difference? Non-addressable LEDs and far less light overall. It kind of gives you a taste or a hint of RGB without flooding your system with it. It's also less expensive, $70 instead of $100. If you want to save $30, if you don't care about addressable, or maybe you're buying a motherboard that doesn't have ARGB ports on it, but it does have regular RGB ports, they are different. The ARGB port is missing one of the pins, make sure you use the correct ones, then maybe buying this makes more sense. Maybe you don't want a liquid cooler, maybe you want a tower cooler. Allow me to point you to the excellent 6 heat pipe direct contact cooler with 2 RGB fans. These are available in the $35 to $40 price range from Cooler Master. I've reviewed this in the past. It's a very nice cooler overall. You can, if you wish, buy a Noctua D15 or a Dark Rock Pro 4. They're $90 each, and they provide awesome cooling. No RGB, and in Noctua's case, it's that wonderful Noctua Brown. Or get the Dark Rock Pro 4. I use those both on my test bench. They're very nice coolers. They just don't have any RGB. Allow me to further reiterate. The stock cooler included with both the 2700 and 2700X, this is the Wraith Prism right here, are absolutely sufficient for cooling the CPU. It's just a touch on the loud side when it comes to the Prism, and maybe 100 megahertz slower, maybe 200 megahertz slower, especially when you're looking at something like this 360 right here, than the stock cooler. However, it's free and included with the CPU. If you're looking for a place to save some extra money, you don't need any of these coolers. Use the included stock cooler. If you're on the fence, build it with the stock cooler and give it a try. You can always buy a cooler after you've built the system and add on to it. This is something you can add later. You don't have to decide now. So leave it off if you're not sure. Try the stock cooler. You might be pleasantly surprised. Overall, this is an epic PC build that will last you for many, many years. It is upgradable to Ryzen 3rd Gen and 4th Gen, but I think the reality is if you build a 2700X today, you'll get 5+ solid years of use out of it. You won't need to upgrade. This is a great machine for handling any desktop task for the foreseeable future. Having said that, there's an elephant in the room that I think we need to address, and that elephant is called Intel. Now, some of you are going to want to buy AMD for philosophical reasons, perhaps due to Intel's past business practices, or perhaps you want to support the underdog. You like the competition we've gotten. I understand. There's nothing wrong with that. However, as wonderful as Ryzen is, Intel is faster, and that is absolutely undeniable beyond any doubt. When these CPUs launched, when this CPU launched, I did a series of benchmarks, and I said that if you want the fastest CPU in the world, buy Intel. Some people disagree with me. But in my further testing and use of both platforms since then, I can tell you that on average, the Intel CPU is 30% faster. A simple example, Blender, running the Blender benchmark, 27% faster stock-to-stock performance between the 2700X and the i9-9900K. Now, when you just look at the price of the CPU, you're going to say, well, that's not justified. That doesn't make any sense. I understand. $280-ish, $480-ish. There's a $200 price difference. It's not quite twice the money, but it's close. But it's only 30% faster, so Ryzen's the better deal. Except these aren't computers, they're CPUs. These two motherboards are the same basic price point. All the rest of the components are the same no matter what you buy. And I've already priced an aftermarket cooler, which frankly is one of the dings against Intel. It doesn't come with a decent cooler. But I've already priced an aftermarket cooler for a variety of reasons on the 2700X. So the only real difference between these two systems is the CPU. $2,500 for the 2700X versus $2,700 for the i9-9900K. For those of you playing the home game, that is less than a 10% total system price difference between the two platforms. I assure you the i9 is a lot more than 10% faster in all respects than the 2700X. Even playing most games, you're going to see 15 to 20% performance difference, and I have seen up to a 40% difference in limited cases, mostly where games are optimized for Intel and not for AMD. The i9 is legitimately faster. There are other reasons to buy the i9 instead of the Ryzen. Integrated graphics. Now, you're not using the integrated graphics to run your display, but you can use them for rendering while using your graphics card for something else. Adobe, for example, will use Intel's integrated graphics for transcoding and rendering versus your graphics card and leaving your CPU free to do other things. I have tested this. On the previous generation chip, there's actually a live stream when I was talking about this, the i7-8700K 6-core version of this, I was encoding a video in Adobe Premiere Pro while live streaming to Twitch and playing World of Warships while using GPU encoding for Twitch, the iGPU encoding for Adobe Premiere Pro, and playing a game. And everything ran smoothly. That would not have happened on Ryzen. Now, that's kind of a weird scenario that most of you aren't going to do. But when people say that there's no point to Intel, I think they tend to ignore such things. Many of you should still buy Ryzen. In fact, frankly, I think a lot of you will end up closer to the $1,600 build down in the description than the $2,500 build. This is kind of taking everything to the nines. Custom PCs are custom, Pick and choose the parts that are important to you. Maybe you like the board, but you don't care for the case. Maybe you like the case, but you think the board's overkill. Do it however any way you want. But if you have $2,500, allow me to present to you the fastest CPU in the world for consumer desktop platforms, not counting high-end desktop. In 3 or 4 weeks, that might change with the launch of Zen 2. Could the 3rd generation of Ryzen chip beat this? Possibly. But then Comet Lake is coming to replace this, so there will be new stuff coming out quite often for the next few years. These companies are back into competition, and you know who the real winner is? All of us are. We win when these guys have to compete. Raise your hands in the audience. How many of you think we'd have an 8-core, 16-thread, 5 gigahertz processor from Intel for under $500 in 2019 if it hadn't been for Ryzen?
Bueller?
Nobody? Yeah, I didn't think so either. So, thank you to AMD. No matter which CPU you buy, you've won because both exist. Like this video if you like it, share it with your friends if you love it. Remember to subscribe to my channel with the big huge red button directly below. Questions, comments, thoughts, feedback, suggestions, that's what the comment section is for. Let me know what you've built. What kind of computer do you have? Are you waiting for Zen 2? Have you bought Intel? Do you want to wait for the 10 nanometer reduction shrink of Intel? That's what the comment section is for. Post what you've done. Whatever you decide for you is what's right for you, and your own situation is certainly going to be unique. So I encourage you to share your own builds. I don't reply to every comment down there, but I promise you, I do read them all. Check the links in the video description, the links to Amazon and Newegg for both builds over here. Those are affiliate links, and they do support the channel. No extra cost to you when you use those while shopping. It supports the channel, and it's greatly appreciated. As I said before, the build video is going to be over on Floatplane, 2 hours and 11 minutes of awesome goodness. Please consider supporting. For the cost of a movie rental, you can subscribe for a whole month, early access, no ads, downloadable videos, exclusive videos. There's more than 15 exclusive videos over there dating past the past 6 months or so. Go check those out. Your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for watching. I will see all of you next time.